Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where both the Russians and the Ukrainians continued attacking each other during the previous night, and the Russians managed to improve their positions. First let's talk about the changes on the ground, and first let's talk about the Orikhiv direction. According to information we have, the Russians several days ago began the Zaporizhzhia counteroffensive operation with the purpose to recapture the settlement of Stepnohorsk that the Russians used as a result of the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation that started somewhere in February of 2026, and these are the changes on the ground. So as you can see, the Russians improved their positions and they recaptured the eastern parts of the northern parts of the city of Stepnohorsk, and the Russians entered this dense network of the fortifications. This information was provided by very reliable pro-Russian sources. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the city of Orikhiv. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Russian sources published this video. Here we can see once again how the Russians were bombing the central part of the city using aviation and using bombs. In this video we can see the Russians discovered a temporary deployment point of the armed forces of Ukraine, and as a result of attack, this temporary deployment point was completely wiped out by Russians. Here we can see a Russian drone flying this area, checking the situation. So as we can see, there are still very heavy clashes between the western parts of the Zaporizhzhia direction and the city of Orikhiv itself. The Ukrainians are trying to hold their lines, and we see that the Russians, despite the fact that they're moving, the Russians are moving very slowly. Now let's talk about the northern directions. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded as well. And first let's talk about the Sumy area. The Russians destroyed another gas station through the western parts of the city of Sumy. This video was published this morning, and here we can see something like a gas station or something like an enterprise that was attacked by Russians. And as you can see, this is not just a gas station, this is a very big service center where we can see from this angle lots of trucks that the Ukrainians were using for probably logistic purposes, or that the Ukrainians were using to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. So as we can see, according to this picture, this concentration of trucks, companies, enterprises, barracks and a gas station were attacked by Russians during the previous 12 hours. At the same time, several neutral mappers and pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians improved their positions to the east of the city of Sumy, and these are the changes on the ground. The Russians continue advancing along the river by the name of Lyptsi, trying to take on the complete control over the villages. On the Russian side of the river of Psyol, we're talking about the settlements like Mala Lyptsi, Veliki Prikol, Petrushevka, and of course the northern parts of the settlement of Orikhiv. Right now the Russians continue their offensive operation, and every single day the Russians improve their positions from 200 to 400 meters. Now let's talk about the Kharkiv direction. Here we have changes as well. The Russians attacked the settlement of Bogadukhov, and according to information we have, this gas station was destroyed, and this video was published this morning. Here we can see civilians moving along this road, and here we can see the ruins that left after the Russians attacked this gas station. As you can see from this angle, this is not just a gas station. Here we have also something like a parking site for trucks, which means that this territory was also damaged by the Russians, probably even destroyed. As for the northern Kharkiv direction, during the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded through the settlement of Kazacha Lopan. And these are the changes, and according to these changes, the Russians right now control more than 60% of the city of Kazacha Lopan, and the Russians continue advancing. The Russians, as you can see, according to these updates, managed to block the road T2117. The Russians managed to cut logistic through this area, and now the Russians don't allow the Ukrainians to supply their contingent through the western parts of the settlement of Kazacha Lopan, and most likely in coming days the Russians would be focused to establish complete control over the territory, and then the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation will announce complete control over the settlement. At the same time, the Russians began bombing the big forest to the north of the city of Kharkiv in the area of the settlement of Lyptsi, and here we have a video where we can see how Russians managed to discover a temporary deployment point of the armed forces of Ukraine through this territory, and then the Russians attacked this area. Now let's talk about the northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded around the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz. As you can see right now, the Russians are tasked to shorten the gap between the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz and the river of Volcha. The Russians continue securing and taking under complete control all these tree lines, fortifications and so on, approaching the settlement of Kolodiaz from many directions, trying to encircle the city from the east. I would like to remind you that according to several pro-Russian sources, the battle for the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz started somewhere at July 11th of 2026, and during 11th of July, pro-Russian sources published that the Russians managed to take under complete control up to 10% of the settlement, and the Russians continue advancing. Moving further, let's talk about the Slavyansk-Konstantinovka direction. I would like to remind you that the city of Slavyansk is connected with the city of Kharkiv with M-03 road, and since the beginning of July, at least 3 gas stations were destroyed along this road, and today we received the report that the Russians once again attacked the city of Izyum, and the sources reported that the Russians were attacking either warehouses, ammo depots, or a gas station on the territory of the city, trying to worsen the logistics for the armed forces of Ukraine between Slavyansk and Drushkovka. As for the territory between Slavyansk and Drushkovka, during the previous 12 hours, no changes were recorded. As for the Dobropolye direction, during the previous 12 hours, no changes were recorded as well. We have covered the most important updates about the situation on the ground. Let's talk now about massive attacks. During the night between the 14th and the 15th of July of 2026, both the Russians and the Ukrainians attacked each other using once again drones. The Russians, according to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, used 124 air vehicles, and furthermore, the Russians, according to information we have, were also using missiles of different type. The Russians were attacking the city of Odesa, and as you can see, we have lots of icons from this area. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation this morning reported that tonight the Russian armed forces continued to strike Ukrainian ports used for the delivery of cargo for the Ukrainian armed forces. As a result of multiple strikes using air-launched precision weapons and the drones, the following were hit in the ports of Odesa and Chornomorsk in the Odesa region. Port infrastructure facilities used for the unloading of fuel and lubricant storage tanks for the Ukrainian armed forces, drone production and assembly facilities. And we have lots of videos on this matter. In this video we can see probably the export infrastructure of the city of Chornomorsk that was hit by Russians and probably destroyed or badly damaged. Further to the north we have fuel tanks that were destroyed in the area of the city of Yuzhny port, in the area at the Yuzhny port infrastructure. Here we have a very big fire broke out of these fuel tanks, which means that the fuel tanks were also badly damaged or probably even destroyed. If we zoom in, we will find lots of fuel tanks in this area, and this means that most likely when the Ukrainians extinguish the fire, the Russians will attack this territory once again. The city of Odesa itself, we continued receiving reports about ships and vessels that were attacked by Russians, and about significant number of explosions that took place during the night between the 14th and the 15th of July of 2026. And here we have a video where we can see how fire crews were trying to extinguish the fire. Pro-Russian military experts came to the conclusion that the Russians decided to stop the economical activity of the Odesa region completely. The Russians will continue attacking the Odesa region, trying to destroy its port infrastructure with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainian side to use this infrastructure for military and economical purposes. At the same time, we start receiving very interesting updates about the situation in the area of the Sea of Azov. Yesterday in the evening, pro-Ukrainian sources published this picture where we can see that the Ukrainians used at least 260 drones to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation provided us a completely different number. The Russians stated that they intercepted 93 drones, so as you can see there is a very big gap, but the gap is not the most important thing. The most most important thing is that pro-Ukrainian sources stated that during the night they managed to damage or to destroy additional 20 vessels. And furthermore, later pro-Ukrainian sources clarified the situation, and they stated that the Ukrainians were no longer attacking vessels and ships and cargo ships through the Sea of Azov. The Ukrainians shift their focus further to the south, and according to information we have, this night the Ukrainians were attacking cargo ships, vessels through the eastern parts of the Black Sea. So which means that the Ukrainians finished the battle for the Sea of Azov, and now the Ukrainians begin attacking vessels and tankers through the eastern parts of the Black Sea, which means that if the situation continues developing the same way, this means that in coming months, obviously by the end of summer of 2026, neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians would be able to use both the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, because every single truck, vessel or tanker would be attacked and immediately destroyed either by the Russians or by the Ukrainians. Now let's move further. Let's discuss some more strikes that were carried out by Russians. According to information we have, the Russians also attacked the city of Kryvyi Rog, and we received a report that this facility was damaged by the Russians. Fire broke out right after the Russians attacked the territory, and according to these videos, it seems that this is something like a service center that the Ukrainians were using for military purposes. So this is the situation in this area. We see that the conflict between Russians and the Ukrainians continues escalating. We see that the European countries continue providing more and more military aid to Ukraine, but from the other side we see that oil prices began rising once again due to the beginning of the new phase of the conflict on the territory of Iran, which means that from one side the Russians have lost their capabilities for oil and oil refinery capabilities, but from the other side the Russians are trying to compensate their losses with higher oil prices. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel remains to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.